WNST, Taos, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We're going to be getting the Maryland Crab Cake Tour presented by the Maryland Lottery and Window Nation back out on the road for you. I'm actually wearing my Raskin Global shirt today. It's March Madness. I have friends and sponsors that are worked up. We're going to be at Hollywood Casino up at the Barstool Sportsbook and Restaurant, family friendly. You can bring the kids. Come on out. It's easy. Big screens, big wings, big burgers, big beer, and big brackets, Luke Jones. So as we get going here, take a moment from Lamar, opening day, St. Patrick's Day, all that. Hey, man, the Terps are kicking things off on Thursday. This is fun to print brackets and to have wagering facilities mobily available to you at Barstool Sports and other places to make this as much fun as it was in the 7th grade back in the days of, I don't know, Greg Manning and Reggie Jackson and, Adrian Branch.
Yeah, no question about it. And I think if you're a Maryland fan in year one of the Kevin Willard era, you're heartened by this. You're encouraged by this. I think any Terps fan going into this season would have said, if you can make the NCAA tournament, knowing that you had some holdovers from the Turgeon era, knowing that you had some transfers, and knowing that this wasn't truly a Kevin Willard team just yet. But making the tournament in year one, you're checking that box and you're saying, I'll take that. And I'm excited by that. So, and that's exactly what the Terps have done. You know, we've talked about it all year in terms of how well they played at home, how much they struggled on the road in the Big Ten. Although I know Kevin Willard has bristled about that, saying that he thinks they played better than their record would indicate, which there's some merit to, but at the same time, 1-9 is 1-9 on the road in the Big Ten. And you look at this draw, West Virginia in the first round, and knowing that Alabama looms in the second round, realistically speaking, if you can beat West Virginia, you'll sign off on this and you'll say, hey, great first year, great accomplishment for a team that did not have very high expectations. And I think just a year where you recalibrate some hope. I think one of the big complaints of the Mark Turgeon era was there being a very distinct ceiling for this program. I think the floor was, we talked about the floor. That was fine. They weren't having these god-awful seasons or anything like that, but you just didn't really think that they had that same ceiling that they had 20 years earlier. So,
and I want to address that because you mention that all the time in regard to Turgeon, and I think that's in regard to the fan base believing that and whatnot. But I would say they were thought to be one of many in the Big Ten, and every year Wisconsin will have a year, and Ohio State will have a year, and Michigan will have some players, and Michigan State will always kind of have players, kind of like Duke and North Carolina. But we're not going to be one of them. We're going to be one of many, right? And that's part of being in the Big Ten. I mean, the football program's got a long way to go, but right? I mean, but it's recruiting better and NIL. The NIL thing changes all of this, and I think it changes expectations. And the question for me, and I learned this 5 months ago when Jay Wright is on stage looking young and, chipper, had a lot of money, and decided not to do this anymore in the prime of his career, or what could have been he could have coached 10 more years, just didn't want to do it this way. And Willard sort of understood it. It's kind of like being a millennial or being an old fart or being a baby boomer, right? Go boomer, right? There's a new era and a new way this is going to be done. And if you're not embracing that, you might as well be Lefty Driesell or Gary Williams or somebody else that doesn't want to play this game, because this is a different game right now.
Yeah, it is. And I don't think anyone necessarily even has it figured out at this point in time. I think that's what everyone's doing. But in the same way we were talking about AAU ball changing the landscape, I don't know, 15 or 20 years ago, at a time when it didn't feel like Gary Williams wanted to do that. And look, that was his prerogative. And all these coaches are going to make that decision, especially ones who've been around the block a few times. But
Jim Boeheim exiting, by the way. I just got to throw that in.
Yeah.
Finally, your guy, Mr. Syracuse. You wore an orange creamsicle something on your head at some point, didn't you?
Not that extreme, but I have a T-shirt in my closet that says "Real Men Wear Orange." Yes, because I went to Syracuse for 2 years. In fact, great timing because.
And then you heard about the weather when you got there.
Sure. But my freshman year was when Maryland won it all, and if you recall, they played the the Sweet 16, the regional final was in Syracuse. So I sat in the last row in the upper deck because as a poor college kid, that's all I could afford was the very last row in the upper deck. But I was there for the win over Kentucky, and I was there for the epic win over UConn. I mean, the best game of the tournament for my money. But I had that, as a freshman getting to watch the Terps up in Syracuse. And then, of course, the following year was the Carmelo Anthony, Jerry McNamara championship team. So, but yeah, fun times there. But bringing it back to the Terps in the modern day.
You were
And
there when Melo was. I mean, that's like,
yeah,
pick you. Dude, you picked a good time to get in and out of Syracuse. I don't say that much to you. And I know we
yeah.
don't talk about this on the air. Like if we did 6 to 10 a.m. radio every day, the whole world would know all this stuff about you over and over again. I'd be ribbing you every time something bad happened to Syracuse or Boeheim cheated and got away with it. But the Boeheim Syracuse thing really is, I don't know where the end of the end of the end is, right? Like Bill Self had some health issues this week. Like, the Roy Williams and the Krzyzewskis and we're at the end of that. We're in the beginning of this new thing where I don't feel so bad on Thursday when they tip off and some of the kids on the floor are actually getting paid. Like it has skeeved me out on the radio for 25 years. And I'm sitting up at Barstool Sports in Perryville eating chips and dip. The bartender's making money. The casino, everybody's making money except the kid's dribbling. And I could never come to terms with that, especially having known so many of these young people. I mean, of all backgrounds, I covered basketball for 25 years. So every Walt Williams and every kid that went through this to get an education and was there and didn't make the NBA, not like Walt, but other guys that just went to Towson or went to other schools and gave up significant portions of their lives. And everybody made money off of Coppin in 1998, except the kids that dribbled and beat, and won. And so that's where I am. I'm happier with it. I haven't figured it out. To your point, I haven't even fully examined all of it because I had people coming at me for guests about NIL money and how much do you understand it? And much like a lot of parts of sports, you care as far as you dive in. And this week, diving into the brackets, right? And just trying to have a little bit of fun with it. But I do feel better about where college sports might be going than how greasy it used to feel.
Yeah, in practice, I agree with you. Or I guess I should say, in theory, I agree with you. In practice, I'm not sure because NIL, transfer portal, we've seen how that has changed the landscape so dramatically where it feels a little more like free agency. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing for these kids. Let's be clear about that. But from a fandom standpoint, I'm not always sure that that's going to be what's best in terms of maintaining interest or maintaining passion. We'll see.
Luke, you were a perfect candidate. You were born 15 years too late. That in 1979, 80, 81, when me and Kevin Eck were getting together at Holabird Middle School, we would get those Toyota ACC whole magazines dedicated to the season. And there just being a few teams and one bid, maybe two, never three, and pouring into those games. I don't know, getting the rabbit ears out on Channel 45 because you couldn't get the damn thing anyway. I mean, the night that Graham lights it up, I'm watching through a mess. So, but it has become much more for a guy my age that comes from that era and that sort of focus to what March Madness has become. I mean, dude, I remember Magic and Larry. I remember taping the Joe Barry Carroll games when I got my first VCR in 1980 and 81 and Kiki Vandeweghe. I mean, I Adrian Dantley. I loved all of that stuff. It is different now where the kid you're in love with this year could be we've dealt with Suleiman, right? Seeing against him, and then all of a sudden, hey, he's a Terp, right? How is that even possible? We couldn't even register that in our minds. That's all kind of over with now. I think for the business of college sports takes a different light for me this week with the brackets, and I just think that needs to be said because I think it is a different ball game.
Oh, it definitely is. And again, when I say that I don't know what it means from a fan standpoint in terms of whether it's going to help the sport, help the product or not, I mean, it's good for the kids and absolutely. And a lot of what you just shared I agree with wholeheartedly. So I think this matchup between Maryland and West Virginia, I mean, take a look at both teams' leading scorer. Jameer Young, transfer. Eric Stevenson for West Virginia, transfer. I mean, you look at West Virginia, they have some transfer players. It's a very senior-laden roster. Maryland having some of the same elements. So, and clearly Huggins has been at West Virginia for a long time. So him and Willard aren't an appropriate comparison. But it just speaks to how much the landscape can change year to year now. And with NIL, and you asked me a couple minutes ago how well versed I am with that. Not at all. I mean, it's too tough trying to track the business of the NFL and Major League Baseball and Lamar Jackson's contract saga and all that for me
Yeah,
to sit
just let
here.
me know who's playing Terps,
Yeah,
right? Like
exactly. I
literally,
mean,
yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and try to pretend to fake that I understand the inner workings of how NIL is going to work. Because again, I think it's still evolving and seeing how it's
Well,
ultimately going
Maryland's
to
got
play
a
out.
quarterback from Hawaii whose brother's rich and famous, and like, I mean, anything's possible, right? Like literally.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what makes this so fascinating when you throw NIL in there as far as market size and how many opportunities are there for college athletes compared to if they're in a market where they're kind of in the middle of nowhere compared to here where there's professional teams everywhere you look, right? And advertising dollars that are going out all over the place, every which direction. So, I think it's something that Willard's going to have to figure out. It's something that all these coaches are figuring out. But in the meantime, understanding that big picture question and how important that's going to be to Maryland's success in the big term, I think that's where you bring it back to the micro, looking at the here and now and saying, making the NCAA tournament and having an opportunity to win a game, against West Virginia, which I think certainly the Terps have a puncher's chance here. I saw I guess the early line has West Virginia as a slight favorite, which is fine. They played in a very difficult conference. You look at their conference record, and then you remember, oh, they played in the best conference in the country, whereas Maryland was in the second best at least in terms of all the rankings and all the different things, metrics that you see. But, the following round, if Maryland can get through, we'll come back to that same theme that we've been talking about. Alabama will be playing less than an hour away from Tuscaloosa. So it is what it is. They're the top overall seed in the tournament. No, I don't give Maryland much of a chance. But if you can win on Thursday, you get that early start, that 12-15 first game of the first round, which is fun. And then if you can win, then you sit back and watch everyone else. So we'll see how it plays out. But certainly you and I talking about this back in November and December, this was always a realistic, good goal for this team to have would be to make the NCAA tournament and see what your draw is in the first round. And then you kind of go from there. So from that standpoint, definitely encouraging. Would have liked to have seen them maybe win an additional game in the Big Ten tournament. That played an Indiana team on Friday night. I mean, that was like a home game, so close, with Indiana traveling to Chicago, not a big surprise there.
Oh yeah,
But
wait till Saturday.
yeah. I mean, exactly. I mean, that'll be nothing. Especially those Alabama fans, they'll be cranky because they weren't in the college football playoff this past year. So they'll be all excited for that. But again, see what happens. See what happens against West Virginia. If you win a game, great. Compete against Alabama. See if you have a chance late. I don't give them much of a chance, but it is what it is. But in the big
Well, I
picture
mean, if you're
sense,
going to compete, get knocked out by
yeah,
a team that can win it all, or have a chance to shock the world, right? Like
sure.
if you're good on that day and you can shoot the ball a little bit in a weird gym, which is really that's been the weird part for them has been road fans feeding off of that energy at home, not being able to feed off that energy at all in regard to shooting, and in regard to sort of patience and being a little yippy on the road in general,
Mhm.
all the way around. I don't know what that means for a little yellow puddle under their legs, but they will have been in the gym on Thursday and allegedly been successful against a similar team. We could talk so much about where teams land on the line And to your point, my point, every time we've talked about the Terps this year, whether it was back in January as they started to maybe pick up some momentum a little bit and start looking like a team that was rounding out and playing well at home, and having big wins early in the year, big point differentials where you're like, hey, they've beaten good teams by 20 points or decent teams, programs by 20 points. You looked at it and said, well, 8-line, 9, 6, 7. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Boy, the 8-9 thing really dramatically changes their prospects of still playing this time next week in regard to home game, 1 seed in the heart of it. I mean, they'll get good barbecue down there, but like this is a really group of death kind of draw for them in regard to how it worked out. That boy, the 6 or 7, maybe shoot the ball one time, beat Minnesota, beat State Penn, beat anybody at the end of the year, Ohio State, anybody, win another game last week, the tournament, something to get yourself off the 8 line. But I'm not a big bracketologist as far as because I think the middle of it all tends to be a popcorn machine. It's just where they kind of scored it out. They really got penalized. That 1-9 hung them, I think, when it came time to put them on a line.
Yeah, I mean, and it just comes down to it. I mean, when you go 10-0 at home in the Big Ten, that sounds awesome, and it is, and it really reflected the kind of home court advantage they had, and that was heartening as far as the future and understanding Big Ten teams coming into College Park, and it, feeling, you're hoping it feels like it did for ACC teams to come into College Park 20 years ago, but yeah, when you go 1-9 on the road and your one win is against a lousy Minnesota team. Now, it was a blowout. Yeah, it was one of those sleepy late Saturday night games at the barn in Minnesota. But yeah, you're going to get dinged. And I mean, you still look at Maryland's overall profile. I think they were number 31 in the net rankings, NET rankings, and 3 quad 1 wins. They had, I think it was a half dozen quad 2 wins. I mean, they had a nice profile, but yeah, you do kind of look at it and say, okay, what have you done away from College Park? And Willard had cited, they did have a couple neutral court wins early in the year, although that feels like an eternity ago, feels like 3 seasons ago.
You know what it feels like? It feels like Christmas.
Yeah, right. I mean,
kind of was.
Exactly. You're talking back in late 2022.
I was eating eggnog and pumpkin spice back then, man.
Exactly. So, from that
Lamar
standpoint,
was healthy and happy.
Yeah. So from that standpoint, you kind of look at where they fell. I mean, it's not surprising if you looked at the bracketology kind of leading into Sunday night selection show. The 8 seed is about where people thought they were going to go. Unlike I would even say, like, look at Penn State, who had the really impressive run to the Big Ten championship game. A lot of people kind of thought Penn State was going to be an 8, and they ended up being a 10, and they draw a Texas A&M team that some people think should have been a better seed than a 7. So, it's all relative, right? I mean, everyone kind of, it's easy to pick out a few teams that you say, hey, that's a favorable draw, but there are plenty of teams that are going to be unhappy one way or the other. But
everybody's got to play Duke eventually, we used to say, right?
Sure. Yeah. So, and by the way, begrudgingly, Duke playing some pretty good basketball at the end of the year. Don't like giving them too many compliments, but so, again, you show up, you play Thursday, see if you can get by West Virginia. I mean, I expect that to be a close game. I think 2 teams that, both played in a really difficult conference, both have things about them you like, and then things about them you say, that's kind of explains why they were an 8 or a 9 seed, right? As opposed to a 6. So, you see how it plays out, and then, yeah, you're going to play Alabama, barring a UMBC over Virginia scenario for the Crimson Tide, and we'll see how it works out. So, but if you had told me back in November, Maryland would be playing in the NCAA tournament, and they would have an 8-9 matchup, I would have signed up for that gladly, and I'd say, hey, that's a good opening year for Kevin Willard. The challenge will be then moving forward. How do you build on that? So
it's a better opening if they win. If at 3:00 on Thursday we move on and they get a big game, right?
Sure.
And they get a chance. All the Maryland disappointments, every time I see Rex Chapman tweet, right, which is like every minute of every day, right, I think back to the year they had a chance, and I was in Rob DeBilliard's basement against Kentucky, and I think about them having a chance against any of the bigger teams, and that's when it would really. I mean, the season breaks through if they're playing basketball next week. Still, somehow, if they create a miracle, the only way to create a miracle is to put a one in front of you. I think. I mean, I don't. It doesn't impress me beating West Virginia, and you can only go so far in the tournament, hoping that the 13 knocks off the 4 and you get that edge, right? And they have had that in the past, where that second round game came at the expense of a higher seed. That's not going to be the case this weekend, and it will create energy. Saturday, if they win, and again, it's a toss. The game's a toss all the way along. By the way, join us up at Hollywood Casino in Perryville. We're going to be at the Barstool Sports Restaurant. If you want to come out, watch the Terps play at noon on Thursday, I'll be there. Free copies of Purple Rain 1 and 2 while they last. Anybody that wants them. And liquidating after 20 years on the integrity of the Baltimore Ravens and their leadership. So please come on by, grab it. I'll have a purple pen and a red hat and by the way, I still have my hat. Do you have your 2002 hat? Do you have your National Champs white hat with the red brim? I have mine.
I know I have a T-shirt. I don't know if I ever got the hat, but I have the T-shirt.
The
somewhere.
T-shirt I had was really comfortable, and I wore it a lot because it felt good on me. It was nice cotton. But the hat I have, I'm going to bust that out. I might even bust out my Lamont Jordan jersey before it's all over.
There you go.
How about that? Yeah.
There you go.
He didn't get any NIL money. I'll promise you that. If we get him on the program, Luke Jones can be found at Baltimore. Luke, anything else you want to say about the tournament? You want to take a stab at a pick, or you want to sound foolish? You just want to do that privately out on your app?
I would think I don't have any bold proclamations because, again, I've been so enamored with free agency and Lamar Jackson watch and all of that. But
Luke, what's going to happen to Lamar?
Well, we'll get to that. No, but my upset alert, and I've been saying this, I said this before the draw, and okay, maybe the draw is a little more favorable for them. I knew they'd be a number 1 seed, but Purdue, I don't know if they have the guard play to really live up to being a Final Four kind of team. I mean, they have Edey. I mean, player of the year, all that. I get that, but we know how guard driven the play is in the NCAA tournament. And, if we're reconvening a week from now and Purdue was knocked out in the second round and they're going to play the winner of Memphis, Florida Atlantic, that wouldn't stun me. I'll just say that I've watched enough of Purdue over the last few weeks to think as a number 1 seed, there's some vulnerability there, that a little more than you'd like out of a number 1 seed. But hey, we've talked about that with the Big Ten all year, how difficult it was to win on the road and all of that. But I'll give you that. Other than that, I'll pick Houston to win. How about that? There's some boring chalk for you.
Well, there you go. And home games for them in the Final Four, no less, right? So that would be something if they were to get there. I got my brackets out, and like when I smell the bracket and I touch the bracket and I get the 4-color pen out. And by the way, Dave Preston's coming on from WTOP this week. So I'm pulling out all the old nasty Nestor stops. I'm grabbing the phone, and it's amazing how many of my friends are dead to talk college basketball. And I'm not kidding you. Like people that I would love to have PB on this week, and like some old school basketball people to bracketize with me and have some fun. But it is fun to look down here and see all these dirtball programs that have disappointed. Xavier. You know how many times I circled Xavier? VCU, Gonzaga, all of you. These teams. I mean, Maryland, I was a bleeding heart Terper, putting them through to the 8 every year, dreaming how they were going to knock off Connecticut or Michigan State, something, right? And it makes me feel old school because did you ever win a bracket pool ever in your life?
I don't think a bracket pool. No,
you would jump up and say, "Yeah, I won one time with Danny."
I've won some fantasy football leagues over the years, but not an NCAA bracket pool. No.
My buddy Mike Fountain had a Kansas Jayhawk thing, and this was a year back. We were drinking beer on Kane Street back in the '80s. We don't talk about that on the air anymore. Red light. Nothing I can be held responsible for that happened 40 years ago. But one thing I was responsible for was holding the dollars for the bracket pool. And he picked Kansas, off the 8 line, 9 line, wherever they were that year, and they won. And it was just like, I could never win a bracket pool. It was always a contribution, which, I've had a lot more success being in rooms watching people win lottery scratch-offs with me lately than I ever had getting to run around winning a pool, because I never ever I got to the weekend one year, like I got to the Final Four, and I got blown up by, I don't know, Connecticut or something like that. But for anybody that's won a pool, please email me and tell me, because I'm not convinced anybody ever wins the money. I'm convinced the guy from the house takes the money. That's what I'm thinking. Always. At least that's the way it worked in Dundalk back in the 80s. So Luke Jones and his brackets can be found at Baltimore Luke. He is more focused on free agency, tampering. Who did this? Who got the brackets and tampering all in the same week? How did we screw that up?
I don't know.
All right, noon on Thursday, we'll be at Hollywood Casino at Barstool Sports, having a little fun with the Terps. We all deserve a little fun with the Terps. We all deserve some March Madness. We all deserve a beer and some wings and some gambling and a casino out in the lobby and free ample parking right at the foot of the bridge. It's a beautiful drive up. Come on up to Perryville. It is my casino of choice. My wife and I have had fun up there. They have great bands up there. The Barstool crowd's great. I mean, more than that, bartenders and staff's fantastic. Come on out on Thursday, spend the day with us. We would love to see you. We're going to talk some more Lamar and some more Lamar, and opening day's a couple weeks away, and some more Lamar and green beer, and probably a little bit Lamar. I am Nestor. We are WNST AM 1570. Towson, Baltimore. It's March Madness. It's brackets. It's madness. We are BaltimorePositive.com. Stay with us.